everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a season review of Hawkeye. Now there'll likely be spoilers within this review and also for other films and shows within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so just beware when going into this overall video, and you can check out all episodes of Hawkeye within Disney+. Now overall, Hawkeye was the fourth Marvel Disney+ television show after WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki. And it centres on Hawkeye, aka Clint Barton, post the events of Avengers Endgame, where following his time as Ronin, more of an assassin taking down criminals, he now wants to have some downtime with his family over Christmas. Things get complicated when young girl Kate Bishop, who aspires to Hawkeye after he saved her during the Chitauri invasion from the first Avengers films, attains the Ronin suit during an auction, which attracts the attention of thugs known as the Tracksuit Gang, who try to hunt down Kate. Coming to her rescue, Clint goes on to protect Kate as they come across various villains and organisations. They uncover certain secrets involving Clint's past and also Kate's mother. Now when Disney released the first two episodes, I stated then that Hawkeye was a light-hearted fun, mildly entertaining, but nothing too groundbreaking or special, and I maintain that sentiment for the rest of the series. Overall, it feels a very safe, simplistic story, which after the more speculative, universal stories, certainly of WandaVision and Loki, in one sense is quite refreshing to have much more of a grounded story come just across as a welcome change of pace. But I do feel there were some potentially interesting elements within the show that weren't quite fully utilised. Clint's past and trauma from his experiences both as Ronin and the Avengers were touched on in small scenes, especially where we see early on he refers back to Natasha. We had one scene when he's looking at the Avengers stage play and that one actress reminds him of Natasha. We have that later scene throughout the show when he saves Kate from falling down off the building, and that's a reference very much so to what happens between him and Natasha at the end of Endgame. So we do get these small little moments, and we also add a bit more of trauma when we learn that Clint is deaf in one ear following these experiences, but I think we needed more of that. Now me personally, I would have preferred almost an entire episode very much talking about Clint's past and following his experiences with Ronin and what he dealt with very much after those events. I think we really need much more of a central focus on Clint's experiences, because these elements kind of get shifted to one side once we concentrate a lot more on Clint's relationship with Kate, and I think it makes the show a bit less compelling in one sense. Now we did get an extended scene, I think it was episode 3, when we deal with Echo's past and how it ties into Ronin, but again that didn't quite have the weight that it should have done. And certainly in the first half of this show, Echo represents yet again another underutilised female antagonist, what we've seen with these Disney Plus shows after Carly from Falcon and Winter Soldier and also Sylvie from Loki as well. I also include Kate's mother in this as well. As a character, she was very underutilised, and to be honest, you can sort of spot her major role a mile off going into the first couple of episodes. Now on the plus side, I really did enjoy the chemistry between Clint and Kate. I think both Jeremy Renner and Hayley Steinfeld have a really strong dynamic that does carry the show and does help retain your interest throughout the entire series. Hayley Steinfeld herself is very likeable for the most part as Kate. There were a few issues, certainly in the episode 4 and episode 5, where despite stating that she's aspired to very much Clint as a hero, she very much disobeys him and goes against his orders at various times, and I just felt that made her slightly a bit less likeable as a character. There were certain instances where she wasn't quite the Mary Sue as what so often is talked about with female characters nowadays, but she was probably a bit more capable and competent that we could stretch beyond credibility. Yes, it's very much hinted that she has trained in the martial arts and fighting, but that was only really talked about within the opening sequence of the first episode. I think we could have done well to have a few much more of a flashback montage where we see Kate growing up and training. Personally, I think we could have had this as soon after one of the best scenes in the entire series when they recreate the Chitauri invasion. I think shortly after that episode we should have then shown Kate far more developing her skills and building herself up as a fighter. I think I would have given it a bit more credence when we see her later on taking on all of the Tracksuit Gang. But I think there's still enough here, enough brightness, enough pluckiness and personality with the character to see if she can have a further prominent role within the MCU. Now, I'm not sure Kate Bishop is strong enough to warrant leading her own series. I can definitely see more of a pairing with her and Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova, who we all know made an appearance within this series following her role within Black Widow. It's very well played by Florence Pugh, very distinctive because of that rich Russian accent that she puts on. And Yelena is, yes, a very charismatic and confident character, and I think she's the perfect counterpoint to Kate's character. So if we are going to indeed get a Hawkeye season 2, I wouldn't mind seeing a more pairing up of Kate and Yelena, because I think it would work better if Kate has somebody else to bounce off of. If indeed we assume that this will be the last appearance of Clint, but there was nothing in this show to suggest that. In terms of standout episodes, I believe episode 3 was perhaps the best, where we had that terrific action sequences, where we had that 360 tracking shot with both Kate and Clint in the car as they're being chased down by the tracksuit gangs, and she's leaning out of the window shooting various arrows. It was hinted at very much in the earlier trailers that we got. That was a very inventive and very speculative action sequence. There was nothing since or before that quite matched the inventiveness of that sequence. So again, I think this made this show, again, very much more of a underwhelming experience. And then we come to the finale, where we get some revelations in terms of the overall story. Of course, the first hugely anticipated was the return of Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin from the Daredevil Netflix series. His performance in that show, I think generally most fans would agree, was indeed the best villain within the entire MCU. And this, of course, coincided with Charlie Cox reappearing in Spider-Man No Way Home as Matt Murdock. And this is for the first time, really, where we see the movies finally acknowledging the existence of the Netflix shows. And watching this finale, this is when I kind of had certain issues and concerns as to how they treated Wilson Fisk as a character. In the Daredevil series, Kingpin was such a fascinating and complex character, full of menace and imposing nature, but at the same time, very much more of a nuanced and introspective character. And this made him such a compelling character to watch. But I have to say, the treatment of his character within this season finale here was very much of a disservice. There's no other way that I can put it. In the beginning, when we see him enter the fray here, where we learn that he is very much the boss of Kate's mother, and he also has ties to Echo as well, the opening scenes was very good. We see those typical mannerisms and twitching of the character, and he does carry a certain presence. But straight away, the overall look of the character, where he has the white suit and far more of the red Hawaiian t-shirt, and he wears the hat throughout, and I just felt this really was much more of a stripping away of all of that menace and imposing nature, as what I mentioned that we got so much throughout the Daredevil series. It's probably best to talk about this more in depth in another video, but we do have to question the overall continuity that this appearance has in terms of the end of Daredevil Season 3. Now, spoilers as I said before, but at the end of that series, Wilson Fisk was apprehended for the second time following an intense battle against Daredevil. So we ask certain questions. Where has he been? How did he manage to free himself from prison? If you remember from the Daredevil show, Wilson Fisk was very much outed in the press as a notorious criminal. It was all over the news, who he was, his identity. So you would assume that Wilson Fisk would very much keep himself hidden. But no, he's walking out casually in buildings and in the street as if nobody would recognise who he is. We then get to the finale later on, where we see him in a fight scene against Kate Bishop. Now, I do understand, whilst Kate Bishop has had some fighting experience, and yes, she's been under the tutelage of Clint, I'm sorry, but there in no way should have this been in any sort of contest whatsoever. Kingpin should have killed her in the first 2 to 3 minutes. Again, if you go back to how he was within the Daredevil show, there is one instance where he's throwing her around in certain objects around the shop, and he has a chance to kill her, but he almost seemingly walks away. Now, I'm sorry, the Kingpin from the Netflix show would have killed her instantly. Very much so, because he would have considered her a loose end. Again, as I referred to before, she would have been someone who could have recognised him later on. There's no way he would have left there just lying around like that. But he walks off, and then Kate is able to fight him back. And then after Kate's mother runs him over into the shop, she later on shoots some arrows on the floor, and they shoot out some electricity, which then blows him up again, but he's still walking off. So it really did undercut the credibility of the character, making him this almost indestructible superhuman. Yes, I do understand from the comic book source material, Kingpin is very much of a physical beast, but at the same time, especially again if we are tying to the Netflix version, he was still very much of a grounded physical character. So I think this again highlights the danger in crossing over these characters into the MCU, where they were of a certain nature from their own individual shows, and where you're trying to configure them into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We had all of this hype and anticipation because the Wilson Fisk we wanted to see was the Wilson Fisk from the Daredevil, in terms of his physicality, in terms of his nuanced character. But what's the point if you're going to completely change the character or adjust the character, where for a lot of the time he's very much unrecognisable to the character that we are used to? It almost feels like a pointless exercise in many ways, and there is part of me that kind of wishes that they just kept him into the opening scene, where we very much established that he's very much behind all of the criminal activity, and then we could have referred back to the character within another show. So I really feel that there's very much of a disservice of a truly great character within the MCU. We concentrate on the rest of the finale, where we see Kate fighting off Yelena, who wants to kill Clint because she feels Clint was responsible for killing Natasha, as what we saw at the end credit scene of Black Widow. And this encounter, again, is very much played for laughs, and I think it took away a lot of the intensity from Yelena as the Black Widow assassin. And I think overall, this was very much in keeping with the finale itself, which was too comedic in its tone. We have all of the LARPers, the cops, or the Marines, whoever they were from the previous episodes, and they're joining in all of the fights outside. We have Armand, of course, adopting very much more his swordsman identity, which I believe is a character from the comics. So we essentially had very much of a typical battle royale for a season finale, but it just felt tonally too comedic. Just, there was no edge, there was no thrill, there was no sense of danger or jeopardy throughout any of these encounters, and especially when we had Clint, who spends a portion of the episode trapped in a Christmas tree. So at this point, I'm kind of rolling my eyes and really came a bit disengaged with the whole events of the entire episode as a whole. And there were instances where I felt Clint kind of got a bit sidelined throughout this finale. We then come on to the climactic parts where essentially Kate has her mother arrested. This didn't really carry any weight because we haven't really spent a lot of time between these two characters. We didn't really feel any emotional bond in terms of their overall relationship. We get that other scene where Clint and Yelena come to some sort of resolution. This had much more resonance, of course, where we refer back to what happened to Black Widow. And we then get a really strange scene where Echo meets up with Wilson Fisk, and then she apparently shoots him. Now, I'm not sure how people feel about this, if indeed Kingpin is actually killed. I suspect he's not. I suspect that he's actually wounded in many ways. But again, that undercuts the credibility of Echo. Why indeed would she wound Kingpin? Why wouldn't she just kill him? Right? So again, I just think this is just disrespecting the character. But I'm pretty much sure we'll get further illusions when we eventually get the standalone Echo series on Disney+. We then come to the end where we basically see Clint returning to his family alongside Kate. And we learn that Clint's wife, played by Linda Carmenteri, was indeed part of S.H.I.E.L.D., I believe, if you go back to the comics. This is tying to the fact that she had a role as Agent Mockingbird within S.H.I.E.L.D., and we know this because he returned the watch that they were referencing throughout the series. Again, this didn't really carry any real meaning for me. I guess it was a nice nod to the source material, but apart from that, there was no real significance of this overall event. We then see Clint and Kate burning the Ronin suit, which I guess is a cyclical way to end the overall presence of that suit. So again, very much so. And then they're discussing what Kate's new name will be going forward, and then we end there. So there was no special end credit scene, just a further play now of the Avengers theatre show that we saw in episode 1. But I just think overall, in terms of this series, as I mentioned before, it was very light-hearted, it was very fun, it was very brisk, but nothing really that significant. And look, with all of the Disney Plus shows, I'm not sure this is a series that I would necessarily go back and revisit again. There just wasn't enough standout moments. I think as a character, I'm not sure Clint quite got the individual story that I think he deserved. There were hints and moments, but I think overall he needed far more of a story of gravitas and emotional weight. I think that the character overall deserved. Where they would go, I'm not sure. Whether we will get a season 2 of Hawkeye, I'm not sure it really warrants it. There was nothing within the end credits to suggest that. I would suspect that I would probably see Kate appearing in other further shows, and they will leave Clint to be happy with his family. So overall, if I had to give a score for Hawkeye, I would give it a 5.8 out of 10. In terms of the overall Disney Plus shows, I'll probably have this second in ranking behind the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I believe is the best of the Disney Plus shows so far. So with the upcoming shows, including the likes of She-Hulk, Moon Knight, and Miss Marvel, all coming next year also, I just want to see a bit more from the Disney Plus shows, and I think Hawkeye overall was a mildly entertaining diversion and nothing more than that. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and review of Hawkeye season 1. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How do you think this compares to previous Disney Plus shows? Do you think it was the best? Do you think it was the worst? Do you think it was somewhere in the middle? Do you think Clint finally got the standalone story that was deserving of the character, or do you think we should get a season 2 where we can delve far more into his overall past and trauma, and you think this would be a far better direction for the character? And let me know also what you felt about this interpretation of Kingpin as a character. Is this a Kingpin, if he indeed is surviving, you would like to see follow? Or do you think it was a bit of a disservice to the character that we got so much from the Daredevil series? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.